Greetings family, greetings brothers and sisters. Thank you for always coming back to watch our videos. Dangote is one of the richest people in Africa. He's actually could be the first or the second depending on how the South African guy is doing. But Dangote in 2023 launched a $20 million refinery. Huge. We've been talking about it in this channel, which we usually tell you that this refinery is the biggest in both Africa and Europe. As in, it's huge. And we were so happy. We are so happy that Dangote has finally realized that we need something like this in Africa. And I'm hoping that all African countries will be supporting him. We saw South Africa saying that we'll be getting a lot of crude and some gas oil from Nigeria, which is amazing. But one reason why we were so happy that Dangote has finally decided to, refine the crude oil from Nigeria is because we have been advocating for minerals, processing, mining our minerals, processing them and selling finished product rather than raw materials. But Nigeria is very complicated when it comes to mining. Actually, Nigeria is one of the biggest producers of crude in Africa. And I have this list from Sputnik in which Libya is the biggest in Africa with 50 billion barrels. Nigeria comes second at 37 billion barrels, followed by Algeria at 12.2 billion barrels, Angola at 7.78 billion barrels, and finally for this list is Sudan, completing the top 5 with 5 billion barrels. So Dangote built this big refinery, oil refinery worth $20 million. It's big. And the reason we were so happy is because Nigeria has been producing crude oil for many years. And we know the likes of Total from France, British Petroleum, they've been Shell, I think Shell and BP merged. They've been producing crude in Nigeria for quite some time. Nigerians, some towns, people die because of chest diseases, that respiratory diseases, that is chest diseases of the lungs because of pollution. We've seen water resources being polluted and all that. Now people have been complaining. We've seen conservation organizations in Nigeria trying to come out and take these guys to court. But these guys have a way of going around the government. Even at some point, the army even shot a lot of people in Nigeria who are against, pollution, because there are people who are dying and these people are not taking credit and doing the right way. Then we also see Nigeria as our biggest producer of crude, exports all that crude to the West. And when it goes to the West, it's refined, the best is left in the West, and it's the worst is sold back to Nigeria. You see how bad it is in the next few minutes. So people in Nigeria have been able to do some artisanal crude oil processing in the bushes, and you find sometimes people losing their lives to accidents, fire accidents in these places. But there was someone who said that as much as that oil that which is being refined in the bush is cheaper, it is also cleaner than what comes out of the West after they cleaned what they got from the Nigeria. And seeing Dangote starting or building this big refinery, big in both Africa and Europe, made us happy. We were amazed because we are always advocating for buy Africans for Africa, like buy Africans. Africans extract oil, Africans process oil and then sell and also use as Africa, because you find in the East Africa we get our oil or our gas oil from Middle East. Some will get it from Libya, South Africa. Now kudos to them, they'll be getting it from Nigeria. And we have all these reserves. We only need our refineries. So Dangote did it. And there's been a problem because remember, if Dangote builds the biggest oil refinery in both Africa and in Europe, it means he's competing against the likes of Total, against the likes of Shell and BP. That is one. Another thing is his oil might be cheaper and cleaner, meaning these guys were buying crude at their price, taking it to their countries, cleaning it, and selling at their price back. So they are making a lot of money. But what happens when Dangote has this big refinery? He could take all the crude if the government allowed. So now comes the regulatory authority of oil in Nigeria. So one thing, Dangote is from one of the biggest producers of crude in Africa, but his company of his refinery cannot find enough crude oil. They have to import crude oil from out of Africa or out of Nigeria. It's crazy, you see. The problem that we've been having is between the regulatory authority of oil in Nigeria and the Dangote refinery. So, Dangote is accused international oil mergers of obstructing access to local crude, and he's also accusing the Nigerian regulatory authority of allowing importation of lower quality fuels. So the regulatory authority is being accused of aiding the importers, the importing cartels, or to continue bringing the low quality fuels. And also, Dangote is accusing oil mergers and oil companies, like we said, of obstructing access to local crude. So they ensure that he cannot, because they are the miners, they are people who mine, and they ensure that he's not getting the oil. So the regulatory authority says that because now the lawmakers, that is the MPs, are bound to get into it, to investigate and all that. The regulatory authority says that his gas oil is substandard compared to imported alternative. Is that true? We'll see in a few seconds. They also say that his refinery is 45% complete. So that's why they are like continuing allowing the importation. They also say that we cannot stop importation because it will be like you are playing a monopoly, which is good because how can't the government support its own, and he's doing the right thing. So the lawmakers, that is the MPs, started an investigation into oil contamination. And Dangote is very, very wise. He called them into his refinery and told them, okay, here we are. I want us to test my oil. I want us to test the final, output. And they tested. And testing it showed that the sulfur content in oil, because this is what determines whether it's contaminated or not, because sulfur is the one that leads to pollution. Sulfur dioxide is the one that is, one of the worst gases that leads to pollution and climate change and global warming and all that. That's what they say. Okay. So they conducted tests and showed that the sulfur content is very, very low. And how low is this?
Uh, we started with about 700 ppm, which is true. That is why we started. Because it was a new plant. We have not commissioned most of them. So by the time that we finish now, we have commissioned part of it. So I'm actually surprised for somebody to come and mention that yes, we have a bad quality. We and the other modular refineries. I can't talk about the quality of the modular refineries, but our own today, like what I said, our own production, you have seen, we have tested it, is 87 ppm. And by the time you come even on Monday, we'll be at 50. By beginning of August, end of this month, beginning of August, we'll be at 10 ppm.
So according to this video, Dangote is saying that his oil is 87.6 parts per million. 87.6 parts per million, okay? And he's saying that in the near future, he's targeting to reduce it to 50 parts per million. And in August, he was targeting to reduce it to 10 parts per million. Remember, I told you that it happened that the oil that was coming back from the West after being refined to Nigeria was even dirtier. Let me use the word dirtier, or more contaminated than what was being processed in the bush. So what is imported is 1,800 parts per million to 2,800 parts per million sulfur content. Imagine Dangote is talking about 10 parts per million. We are talking about the important one being 2,800 parts per million. That is like 280 times more contaminated. You see? So Dangote is doing better than them, way better, and that is why they are scared. Because if we were to follow the rules, we will use Dangotes and they will be out of market. So it's crazy how they are trying everything to ensure that this effort by our big man Dangote fails. And just the other day, that Dangote was targeting to have 10 parts per million in August. And because of the regulatory authority fighting Dangote, we even saw Dangote halting construction of the steel mill because Dangote also wanted to enter the steel manufacturing. Like you mine your iron in Nigeria, you process it in Nigeria, the people of Nigeria use. Because Dangote does the same for cement. He has a cement factory. And this cement factory is not only in Nigeria. When you go to Ethiopia, it's Dangote. When you go to many African countries, it's Dangote. And it's so affordable to many people. Okay? So, Dangote is doing good for Africa. But you see what their own people, their own Nigerians are doing. They are trying to bring him down. And I am hoping that these guys will allow him to access the crude oil and access the market. And also, he's the best. And I'm sure that his oil will also be cheap. People from Nigeria can tell us is what is the price of oil nowadays in Nigeria. But because, he hasn't been given the ability to spread his full wings, I'm sure there's not a big change. But if he was allowed to process 100%, there will be a lot of change in both Nigeria and the surrounding nations. I've heard people from Nigeria complaining that oil in Ghana is cheaper than in Nigeria, and they are getting it from Nigeria. I don't know. But if the regulatory authority continues to push down Dangote, the oil will not go down. That's the plan with these people. So this week we saw African Energy Chamber criticizing Western NGO for alleged attempt to discredit Dangote. And the NGO Dialogue Earth reportedly tried to recruit Nigerian journalist David Hundeyin to write an article criticizing the refinery's impact on Nigeria's climate. Hundeyin exposed the article as an attempt by the Western NGO to manipulate African voices, ultimately hindering Africa's energy progress. The AEC that is African Energy Chamber, strongly condemned Dialogue Earth's tactics, emphasizing the crucial role oil and gas play in African economic development and energy transition. Dialogue Earth's actions underline a pattern of Western NGOs attempting to undermine African energy sector under the guise of environmental concern, according to the statement. And he said, the executive chairman, NJ Ayuk, said the AEC fully supports Hyundeyin and commends him for standing up to Dialogue Earth. We are totally opposed to Western NGO trying to use African voices to advance its own biased agenda. And that's what we've always been talking about. As in, they use their NGOs to compromise our efforts. Like this one will be talking about how Dangote is polluting the Nigeria's climate. But we know which oil is polluting. Dangote is 10 parts per million. Theirs is 2,800 parts per million. So which one is better? But now they have to use, They use local people, but kudos to David Hundeyin, who said, no, I'm not going to be used, and I hope nobody else in Nigeria will be used to compromise Dangote, because Dangote promises cheaper oils, cleaner oils, more jobs, and for our Nigerian brothers and sisters. So Nigeria, as you go to the streets, also fight for Dangote, and the lawmakers of Nigeria also, can you fight for Dangote, because the international community is trying everything, using the regulatory authority, using the local media, using their media to spread propaganda. They are using every effort to compromise Dangote, because he might be the sole producer of cleaner oils in both Africa and Europe. Thank you guys for watching. Let us know what you think in the comment section, and if you'd like to support us, we have Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. We have super chats and super thanks, and we'll see you in our next video. Bye bye.